You may have watched our K-Series swap recently where we put in a JDM K24 into my EK Honda Civic, and put on just about as many mods as possible to make as much power as I could out of the naturally aspirated engine without changing the rods and pistons. It made 261 wheel horsepower and 224 wheel torque.
Through that 5-episode, nearly 2-hour-long series, you might have been thinking to yourself, dang, that's a lot of money. It must be nice to have rich parents. Now, you're right, it is a lot of money, but I live my life well below my means so that I can afford car parts. It's all about different priorities, and for me, I like modifying cars, which means I cut costs elsewhere in order for me to be able to buy all of these parts.
We're also obviously sponsored, but you'd be surprised how many parts on this build were not sponsored. I always want the best stuff, so sometimes that means saying no to sponsors that make products that aren't up to par. I've paid a lot of money out of pocket for the higher end parts that I want. I'm going to list everything out in this video at the MSRP cost, so it's an accurate estimate.
Now, obviously, I'm not starting with a stock EK Honda Civic. I had the B16B swap in this car, and I was about $8,000 invested. You can see the full breakdown of that in the previous video. But I sold the B16B swap and I sold the Volk wheels, which got the price down to $3,700. So basically, this is a $3,700 championship white shell with a couple little Honda Civic Type R goodies inside. But I digress. On to the K-swap cost. Now, from what I understand, your average K-swap is going to cost between $4,000 and $7,000 if you do most of the work yourself and get most of the parts used. That's going to be for your average K20 or K24 swap in a Honda Civic or an Integra chassis. That's going to be about 220 wheel horsepower, and if you want any more than that, that's where the cost is really going to nickel and dime you. Keep in mind, this is an exponential net of returns. I built this car to nearly the highest level possible for Grid Life Street Class, which means I paid more for the higher end, higher performance parts possible. You could probably get 90% of the performance of this car with only half the cost.
It looks something like this graph. You could do K-swaps for really cheap and still get a ton of performance. That's the most bang for the buck. Then you can do what I did, to buy the best stuff possible for everything to squeeze out every little bit of power possible. Most K-swaps make around 220 to 240 wheel horsepower. If you want that extra 20 wheel horsepower that I have, it's going to cost you probably twice as much for the swap.
With all that being said, let me walk you through the cost of every item for everything that I did to my Honda Civic.
The first thing that I did was buy the motor. It's a JDM K24A out of a 2007 TSX. Very low mileage, likely around 60,000. This cost $895. Then I started to clean up the engine bay by stripping everything out and sanding and painting the bay. The paint supplies cost me $235. Not bad for such a good, clean result. Then I bought a good, mint condition Integra subframe off of Facebook for $300. You already know about those stainless steel bolts. I bought those for $200. It's not a bolt kit. I bought individual bolts by measuring bolt sizes in the engine bay and ordering those individually. I've added some Amazon links in the description for all of you that are interested in them. I then towed the car up to Wisconsin, which is an expense in and of itself, but I'm not including that. Andy Smedegard at ASM is the K-swap expert. I could have done this swap myself, but it would have taken 10 times longer and it definitely wouldn't have been done as well as somebody who's been doing K-swaps every day for years. We kicked things off with a teardown of the K24. We put on a Type S oil pump, cover that up with a Moroso baffled extended capacity oil pan. The factory accessories, gaskets, and bolts all added up to $587. We then took the K24 head off to put on the K20 Z3 head. A freshly machined K20 Z3 head was $600 from a friend. The Drag Cartel 2.2 endurance cams and SuperTech valve springs were $1,299. We put on a 50-degree VTC cam as well. The engine was buttoned up with some K-tuned billet parts. The engine post mount, the upper coolant housing, the auto tensioner, and the EP3 pulley. The RBC intake manifold was $300, and then Andy ported it out to match it with the 80mm K-tuned billet throttle body. We then put on the fueling system. I used Injector Dynamics ID1050X injectors, and the K-tuned center feed fuel rail kit with AN lines, fuel pressure regulator, gauge, and mounting bracket. The E85 flex fuel sensor was $118, along with the Walboro 255 fuel pump, which was $88.
Now we're up to $7,566, and that's mostly just the engine. So you can see how these costs add up quite quickly. But you could also see where you could save some money if you didn't want to go as extreme. For example, if you don't want E85, you could get by with some RDX injectors and a stock fuel rail. That would save you about $1,000. And if you weren't planning on making over 250 wheel horsepower, you probably don't need a K20 head, which is going to save you another about $2,000 between the headwork and cams. My build is by no means a budget build, and I wanted to make as much power possible out of a stock block. And as a result, it cost a lot.
Now we move on to the drivetrain. We used a stock XD clutch and lightweight flywheel. We mated the engine with a Civic Si transmission because it had the right gear ratios for me and a factory LSD. This was connected up with K-Tune's OEM spec shifter cables and the billet K-Tune TSX shifter and mounting kit. This was all connected up to the car with Hasbro billet mounts. I put in a K-tuned clutch slave cylinder and stainless steel braided lines. The nervous system of this car is a K-tuned tucked engine bay harness with a conversion harness for the EK, attached to a Honda K-Pro V4 ECU mod on an RSX ECU. We then put on a Koya Red RSX full-size radiator with a fan shroud kit. We then ran into a clearance issue with the throttle body, so I ordered a swivel neck thermostat housing, RSX radiator hoses, and a 72mm throttle body with billet TPS. Since I went with a 72mm throttle body, I'll return the cost of the 80mm throttle body. Andy then went on to fabricating the exhaust system. It starts at the engine with a K-tuned 4-to-1 race header. Andy welded that up with V-band clamps to a 3-inch piping kit with a vibrant resonator and a K-tuned muffler. We put in Hasport K-swap axles with an RSX half shaft, K-tuned 3.5-inch intake, AEM wideband, and the remaining miscellaneous fluids and shop supplies added up to $186. I also later put in power steering, a K-tuned valve cover, and an anti-gravity 3-pound battery. I still can't believe that thing is 3 pounds.
It blows my mind that we're already up to $16,571. I don't recommend adding up the costs of your own builds yourselves, because it hurts a lot. Now, I'm not saying that this is going to cost you $16,000 to build. You're probably going to find a lot of these parts used, which is going to make it a lot cheaper. And again, I'm going on the full extreme. I'm trying to get the most amount possible out of a stock block. So it's going to be a lot cheaper if you're not trying to do that. You can get pretty close in power-wise without spending this much money. I'm also not including the cost that I paid Andy for the labor work done to this car because I'm assuming that you're planning on doing this build yourselves. Now, I'm not done. I still have suspension, brakes, wheels, tires, and the roll bar.
The K-tuned rear control arms were $170. That's made it up to the K2 circuit coilovers, which were $1,549. I put on K-tuned front control arms and compliance bushings, the K-tuned front roll center correction ball joints, Moog sway bar end links. The rear disc conversion actually got pretty pricey since I wanted to get everything brand new. The brake rotors, pads, e-brake cables, and the rear wheel bearings were $442. The rear roll center correction kit was $225. The K-tuned camber and toe arms were both $140. And the rear trailing arm bushing was $95. Then onto the front brakes. The ARP extended studs and lugs for all 4 corners was $165. The front wheel bearings were $56. The Mini Cooper rotors were $84. The Porsche caliper adapter kit was $199. The calipers themselves were $261 off of eBay. DTC 60 race pads were $188, and the RBF 660 brake fluid was $24.
That's a total of $4,260 just for the suspension and brakes. I'm actually getting tired of adding all this stuff up. It's crazy how quickly it can get out of control. We're at a grand total of $20,831, but there's still a few items left.
The Koenig wheels were actually quite affordable at $586. Ironically, the tires they're wrapped in cost more at a $759 price tag. And lastly, we'll finish it all off with the roll bar, which costs $665 plus the ridiculous cost of shipping.
That brings us to a grand total of $23,180. And that doesn't include the initial car cost that I talked about in the beginning of this episode. If you want to add that, it's another $3,700, which brings the total to $26,880. This Civic is definitely not worth $26,000. Modifying cars doesn't make sense. Think about what you could buy for $26,000. But building cars isn't about what's practical or profitable. It's a hobby, and hobbies are expensive. It doesn't have to make sense. If I wasn't into cars, I'd be spending my money on some other hobby. Everyone likes to think that being a car enthusiast is the most expensive hobby, but that's definitely not true. Golfers, rare art collectors, or even traveling the world could cost a lot more than being into cars. So no, my Civic doesn't make any financial sense, but it's an incredible car, and I've had an incredible journey building it, and I can't wait to continue enjoying this car even more.